land was built for freedom, but still our kids can't pray in school. They used to read the Bible, but now that breaks the rule. Even on our money now it says we can't, God we trust. It's time we Christians show the world that still stands true for us. All across the country needs the cross, a symbol of redemption, and it paid for us all. The Statue of Liberty came to save the world that's lost. All across the country needs the cross. Our fathers fought and gave their lives for a flag that waves so proud. But now we burn the stars and stripes, we let all glory down. These laws that break our hearts today were made on Capitol Hill. We need to climb that hill once more where Jesus' blood was spilled.
Amen.
All across the country needs the cross, a symbol of redemption, and it paid for us all. The Statue of Liberty came to save the world that's lost. All across the country needs the cross.
Amen.
All across the country needs the cross, a symbol of redemption, and it paid for us all. The Statue of Liberty came to save the world that's lost. All across the country needs the cross. All across the country needs the cross.
Amen.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Doris. You can turn to Psalm 121. I don't know where I'm going to read it or not. But I'm definitely going to be speaking from that psalm, probably a couple of verses there. First two verses go something like this. It's a psalm of David. I will look unto the hills. From whence comes my help is a question. And then he answers it with these words. My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Would you bow with me, please? God, this morning it's me again. And I stand in your presence, Lord, knowing that unless you speak, nothing happens. So, Father, this morning I would ask you to take my words, make them thine, rescue me from me. For this I speak in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Ken and Edna go to the state fair every year. And every year Ken says, Edna, I would like to ride that helicopter. And Edna says to Ken, Ken, it's $50 to ride that helicopter. $50 is $50. And so one year they go and Ken says, Edna, I am 75 years old. And if I don't ride that helicopter this year, I may never get to ride it in my whole entire life. Well, the pilot of the helicopter overhears the conversation and he comes over to them and he makes them an offer. He says, listen, folks, he says, tell you what I'll do. I'll take both of you up in that helicopter free if you do not say one word Don't utter a word. But if you say just one word, it's going to cost you $50. They agree. Into the helicopter they get, and off they go. The pilot gets them up, and he does all kinds of hot doggy kind of maneuvers. Oh, he does loops, he does this, he does everything that he knows to do with that helicopter. He lands the helicopter, and he walks over to Ken, and he says, "Congratulations, I did everything that I could to get you to say something, and you never said a word." And Ken says, "Well, I started to say something when Edna fell out, but $50." It's called the Psalm of Ascents. Ascents, which means rising. Klaus Westerman, in a little book on the Psalms, said it's a liturgical psalm, something that would be used in a worship service, much like we do a responsive reading. The worship leader would read a part of the psalm, then the congregation present would come in and repeat something after that. But I want to begin where David is in this, and I want to speak kind of in a parable form, along with some actual history about this whole entire thing. David has achieved a lot in his life. I don't know where he is, at what age he is, or what was the circumstance entirely for David writing this little psalm. It's only 8 verses. Of course, he's been king for a long time. We know how he got to be king. You know, Saul was king. God was kind of fed up with him, turned his back on him, and he sends Samuel, the judge prophet, with a horn of oil down to the house of Jesse. Says, "There's a son down there. I want you to choose one of his sons to be the next king." And we know what happens. Samuel goes down and says to Jesse, "We're going to have a sacrifice. We're going to worship, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. Now I want to look at all your sons," and begin to march them through. And they come through. The first one is a big old hefty kind of guy, you know, tall and handsome and strong and full of strength. God says, "Samuel, that's not the one." Samuel thought it would be. And all of them march through. We know the story until finally there's none left. And Samuel says, "Is there not just one more son down?" Jesse says, "Yeah, he's out tending the sheep." And so Jesse says to one of the boys, "Run down there and get him." They bring David in, and boy, does he come in, a little ruddy-faced little boy. He's been out in the sun. Naturally, he's going to be kind of sunburned. Probably weighs soaking wet about 130 pounds. God says, "This is the one." Well, David gets anointed. This is thank God anointed David this time. God called David to be king. Well, being king, and he makes Israel a very great nation. And perhaps he's reflecting up all of that history. He remembers his own failures, his debacle with another man's wife. And he tried to hide it and committed murder. Maybe he remembers his dysfunctional family, the family that he had a beautiful daughter, had a son who coveted that beautiful young virgin. His name was Amnon, her name was Tamar. And he lured her to his house because he said he was sick, and she brought him some soup, and he said, "How about feeding it to me?" And we know that he raped her. And then after he had done that, he despised her and threw her out. And she was devastated. And Absalom found her and says, "Well, what happened?" He found out. And so Absalom made it his business that he would avenge what happened to her. And so 2 years pass. And then Absalom has a sheep shearing party, invites all the king's sons. And he gives some instructions. He says, "Now at my signal, I want you to strike Amnon and kill him." And that's exactly what happened. And the message gets back to the king. And your messages always get kind of messed up, don't they? If you watch the news close enough, you will know that it's very difficult to get the truth.
Amen.
Because by the time the reporter gets through with it and spinning it and twisting it, we never know whether we're getting the truth or not anymore. And so the message came back to the king, all your sons are dead. And somebody comes along and says, no, just one of them. Just Amnon. He's dead. The rest of them are okay. Well, David was kind of perhaps a permissive father. You see, in a family, and you who are fathers and mothers and even perhaps grandfathers, know that there has to be accountability and there has to be discipline. Without discipline, without accountability, society falls apart. Look at our own society. Look at what has happened in America because we had become too permissive. Way too permissive. Now, my father never did beat me. He didn't have to. All he had to do was speak, and my ears were tuned. Because I wanted my seat protected. So he's perhaps reflecting over his family history, and he finally decides that maybe he has been too permissive. And he's come a long way from where he started. Remembering all of the history, the time that Saul tried to kill him, the time he put men together, an army together that flocked around him, and he went down to the Philistines, spent some time down there, running, until Saul was finally killed. And he was finally enthroned. He didn't become king immediately when he was a child and when he was anointed. It was years later. Now there's another story. Over in the book of Luke, over in the 15th chapter, there's a very familiar story. We all know it very well. One of Jesus' most beloved stories about a prodigal son. Boy, our world is filled with prodigal sons and daughters, and has been for a long time, hasn't it?
Amen.
Maybe there was a father that was too permissive as well. He gave in to the wishes of his young son, who was probably not yet ready to take on the world. Not mature enough. There is an upside to that story, and that here is a young man who is willing to dare, if you will. And he wanted his part of his inheritance, and his father gave it to him. And off the way, right down the road he goes, and as long as he's got money, he's got friends. When the money runs out, his friend runs out, and he winds up, as we know, in a far country, in a pig pen. And it don't take long to get there. You can get there very quick. I want you to move forward with me now for a long way. I want you to come to 1776. 56 men who committed treason and signed a document that you and I call the Declaration of Independence. There were 7 different religions that were represented in that group. There were 2 deists. I was kind of dismayed when I discovered who they were. Deists just believe that there's a God, but he may not have any personal influence in your life, you see. There's a super being, there's a more powerful being out beyond us. And that was Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin. Several had attended some kind of Bible college. Some were preachers, many were lawyers, some were businessmen, some were farmers. They came from every walk of life, but they were willing to dare to sign a document that would sever their relationship with England. You know what's distressful for me? Now, I'll tell you, I watch Bill O'Reilly. Maybe you don't like him, and I respect that. He irritates me too sometimes. But there's a section on how, you know, as the water's whirling, this guy goes out and he interviews some people, and he asks them these basic history questions. From whom did America receive its freedom or get its freedom? France? Japan? They don't know. And I'm talking people who would go to college. They don't know the basic facts of the history of the country that they live in. It appalls me. It appalls me. And I'm sure it does many of you. We have several very well thought of religious institutions in our country. Harvard, Yale, Princeton. But these schools, when they were originally founded, were founded on religious principles. They were founded on Christian principles. They were founded for the purpose of training young men into ministry as well as anything else. But that's no longer true. And the question is why? And I've searched for an answer, and I come across this, that someone has said it's because of naturalism. Naturalism. The kind of naturalism that Charles Darwin observed when he went down to the Galapagos Islands and he saw all these different species of animals, and he came to the conclusion that there was some kind of force, and he called it evolution. They had evolved from different sources, from maybe one basic source or whatever. I never read the book, don't care to read the book. And that put a crack in the foundations of everything that Christianity ever believed in. He published it and called it The Origin of Species. And it opposes the Genesis story of creation. The psalmist says, if the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? Well, we can't leave that question there. We cannot leave that question there. The righteous can cause a revolution, a sudden and radical change. That's how Webster defines a revolution. Science found a crack in the foundation of Christianity, and it had used it to exploit our Christianity and our base. And so what we have now is secular progressive society that has completely divorced itself from our Judeo-Christian principles upon which this country was founded. You cannot deny that. You cannot destroy it. You cannot take it away. It is there all over Washington. So our educational institutions that were founded upon these Christian principles and for religious purposes have become bastions of secular progressive liberalism that is ripping apart the basic principles upon which this country was founded. The nation's political leadership is helping steer the ship of state in that same direction. The America that you and I grew up in is disappearing. Now maybe some folks like the way the direction America is going. 66% of us don't. But the problem I have with that is the 66% that don't are not doing much about it. I tell you, as far as I'm concerned, that America that you and I grew up in is disappearing, and I think it's being destroyed like some great whale that is gasping for its last breath as the harpoons of the whalers pierce into its massive, majestic body. Mr. Obama went down to Egypt when he was first elected as president. Some have called it his apologetic tour. He made a statement, and I heard that statement again this morning. Whatever America was, it is no longer a Christian nation. And you know, I agree with him. Here's why. Now, he stopped too short, you see. He stopped short. He should have gone on and said, but America was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. He didn't say that. But he stopped right there. And I can agree with that. Because for America to be a Christian nation, we would have to be a theocracy. And the pioneers came here. The pilgrims came here to seek religious freedom from government or religious oppression. They wanted religious freedom. You want a theocracy? Look at Iran. It is governed upon its Quran. Everything that happens in Iran, its whole entire government, is based on that one book. Every decision it makes, every action it takes. I would agree with Mr. Obama that we were not a Christian nation, never were. But we were indeed founded on Judeo-Christian principles. They have been the hallmark of what has made America one of the most powerful nations in the world. All you've got to do is walk around Washington to find that out. On top of the Washington Monument, there is a cap, an aluminum cap, and inscribed on that cap are the Latin words Laus Deo, praise be to God. Now the National Park Service has made a replica of that cap, and they put it inside the monument. But they had put it in there in such a way against the wall that you cannot read the inscription because they want to divorce the country from that principle. The first sentence in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence reads like this. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are the rights of liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness. Inscribed in that statement is the basic principle that God is the Creator. The creation is God's business. I don't care how God did it. I really don't. God may have used a big bang to create this thing, but things don't randomly happen. This world cannot possibly have randomly happened as science likes to think it did. You and I were not created randomly. Now, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of study, and maybe some of you have too, in science and anatomy. I know a little bit about the body. I worked in the medical field a long time. I understand something about how the body works. I understand something about how amazing. The psalmist said we are made majestically. We are amazingly made, just a little bit below the angels. So I understand, and I don't believe that you and I just randomly happen. I believe that God created you and me. I believe in the Genesis story. I believe the Holy Scripture. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't stand here. You go to the Supreme Court building, you've heard this, you know this. Those huge oak doors that lead into the chamber where the justices carry out their business. And on those great panels, on the lower panels, are the 10 Commandments. I'm just waiting for the day that somebody comes and says, we need to remove them. Where the justices sit, there is a relief over their head of great lawyers throughout the history of time. All of those lawyers are looking at one lawyer in the center, one man in the center. That man represents Moses, the great lawgiver of the Bible. The great tragedy of America is the fact that there is not a biblical worldview for this country. And that's sad. I think, like the prodigal son, America is being led down a road into a far country. And at the end of that country, there is a pig pen. And you know what pigs eat? We commonly call it slop. You know, the scraps from the kitchen table. When I went to college the first time, I've been to so many colleges I can't even remember them. I spent 25 years getting an education. I'm still not sure I'm too smart. Anyway, I worked in the cafeteria. And when when the students got through eating their dinners or their meals, they'd bring their trays and their plates over, and whatever was left, we'd scrape into a great big metal container, bin, trash can kind of thing. And then we would get ready to close out the cafeteria. Men or whoever took a couple of us, I did it, some of us did it, would carry that up above the cafeteria a little bit to an embankment, and there was a platform kind of overhung that embankment, and down below that platform there was a huge, great, giant kind of open vat kind of thing, might call it a silo, just a huge thing, and it had pipes running to it that came out of the steam room that was over that embankment. And we'd pour that stuff in there, those scraps in there, and it would be cooked and stirred up, because you see the school had a farm, and on the farm they raised hogs, and every once in a while a truck would come and empty that thing out and carry all of it over to feed the pigs. And so that's what happens in a pig pen. I remember growing pigs and raising pigs when I was a kid. We didn't grow, we raised them. You don't grow pigs, you raise them. So we raised a couple of pigs at various times. And I remember one time we had a pig pen. It was way distant from the house. Just a little fenced-in lot, and had a little wooden shed kind of thing where the pigs could even get out of the weather. And I remember going out into a neighbor's woods with some burlap sacks to gather up leaves to make a bed for those pigs, which didn't last very long. But I remember this one thing. There was such an odor around that place, it was impossible to stay there for very long. Because you and I know what pigs can produce.
Yeah.
America is being led down a road to a far country, to a pig pen. And the slop from that pig pen is flowing across the country. And it has touched the lives of some Christians, particularly Christian businessmen, and and women, and it has cost some people their little family businesses. And it may eventually destroy the values that you and I hold dear in this country, which we have held for the last 240 years. It's time that we look to the hills from which cometh our help in times past, and stand ready to ask for that help again. But it only happens if we are willing to engage with God. We need to get back to the basics. Back to where David was thinking about in the beginning of his psalm. I believe that's what David's doing. He's looking back at the basics. He's come to that place in his life where now he's an old man and life is just about to come to a close, and now he's spiritually bankrupt, and he needs to re-engage with God. And he can say, I look to the hills from whence come my help. I know where it comes from when I ask the question. It comes from God. What are the benefits? Well, he tells us what they are. We are encircled by the cloak of God's constant protection, because evil is always couching at the door to find that crack in our basic foundation and wiggle its way into our lives and destroy us. Elijah put it this way: for you have been a strength to the poor, a strength to the needy in his distress, a refuge from the storm, a shade from the heat. For the blast of the terrible ones is as a storm against the wall. And like Isaiah, the psalmist is talking about God's protection. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. Thinking about David had been a shepherd, being out in the sun, been out in the weather, been out in all kinds of conditions. And the right side was the side that needed to be protected. Latin writers call it the latus apertum, because that was the side that was always exposed in battle, because you held the shield in the left hand. But the right side had no protection. Well, God don't offer me any protection. And if He is, I'm not aware of it. How closely are you connected to God? How engaged are you with God? You may go to church every Sunday. You may go to Sunday school. You may have been one of those people that had a drug condition when you were a kid, like many of us have. We were drugged to church every time the doors were open. But you still can do that and never be engaged with God. Because we have to be engaged with God on a daily basis. Not just once a week. For an hour or 2 hours. Not just period. Not when some condition happens and we need God in our life. I'm always amazed at those people, that you are too. They never need God until some tragedy happens. They never call upon God until some condition happens in the family, or they're in financial trouble, or there's a health issue, or somebody died. The saddest people in the world are those individuals who lose a family member and they are not quite sure where that person went. I've had occasion to have come across people like that, and I'm sure some of you have. So we have the benefit of being cloaked in God's protection every day. Now in verses 6, 7, and 8, and here's what the writer says. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve you from all evil. He shall preserve your soul. The Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. Now those are not just words, folks. That's what God can do for you and for me. That's what God is willing to do for you and for me. Speaking from the point of the view of the shepherd would need protection from the sun. And there would be protection from the moon. There was a belief that the moon in the ancient world caused disease. There's still that belief among some primitive peoples. And we look at the moon just amazed and in awe. And it's 250,000 miles away. And we can say, we've put a man up there and brought him home. When Teddy Roosevelt was president, he would sometimes invite a guest out to his house for dinner and for an overnight stay. And after dinner, they would go out onto a screened-in porch or a veranda, some kind of place, and they would smoke a cigar. By the way, if any of you want one, I happen to have one. It's not let's make a deal, but... And then after they'd smoked their cigar, they would stand out in the yard and they would gaze up into the sky for a long time. And Teddy Roosevelt would say to his guests, I think we're small enough now that we can go to sleep. Do you ever do that? It's hard to see the stars here in the city with all the lights. But boy, you get up in the mountains where there are no city lights and you can just see stars as deep as you can look into the heaven. And stand amazed in the presence of Almighty God. I love that old hymn. I stand amazed in the presence of God. out looking at the stars and you're gazing into the heavens, that's exactly what you're doing. Standing amazed in the presence of God. As you go about your daily life, says David, you're going out and you're coming in. And the one true fact is that God and only God can preserve your soul. Only God. Only God. No other way. The secular progressive world we live in is not going to buy into anything I've told you this morning. Not until it travels so deep into the pig pen and finds itself in slop so deep that it can find no way out. Other than to look up. Other than to look into the hills. And maybe, just maybe, it will come to that same place that David did. I will look to the hills, from which comes my help. My help comes from the Lord, who did indeed make heaven and earth. Amen. You know, when I'm feeling a little down, when I'm feeling a little sad, when I feel like that I've just been cut off from God for what it is, I get caught up in life, I get caught up in doing this, I get caught up in saying I've got to do that, and we'll all do that. We get so busy with life that here it is 6 months into the new world, new year, and we've only got 6 months left. And we wonder, where did the time go and what did I accomplish? I think it's time that we pause like David did and look into the hills and ask ourselves the same question that he asked. From whence comes my help? And we know what the answer is. It is God. God's always there for us. All we have to do is to respond to his presence. But we can't do that unless we're engaged with him. Our world is too busy. Our world is too noisy. But God speaks in a still, small voice. That's what Elijah discovered in a cave when he went back to his basic roots. We're going to stand and sing our hymn of invitation. Maybe God is speaking to you this morning. Maybe someone here needs to come and pray about some issue going on in their life. I do not know what your need may be today. You do, and God does. As we stand and sing hymn number 324, would you respond if God is speaking to your heart?